They told me to terminate Subject 6V. But when she looked at me, really looked at me, I realized this wasn't a mercy order. It was murder. If you enjoy stories where humanity's compassion defies empires, where one human's choice changes everything, then make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell. There's a new HFY sci-fi story every day. The corridors of Kethri Prime smelled of sterilized metal and cold circuitry, the kind of place built by a species that thought emotion was an infection to be scrubbed out. Garan Holt followed the alien overseer down the narrow passageway, his boots ringing against the deck plates. The Kethri's thin voice clicked and buzzed through its translator, reciting procedure in a language that might as well have been carved from ice. They called this level the containment array, though the word kennel would have been closer to truth. Rows of translucent pods lined the walls, each glowing faintly from within, each housing a curled form, feline ears, vulpine tails, scaled hands, silvered eyes staring at nothing. He hadn't been on the ship a week. They told him humanity's role here was regulatory oversight, a chance to prove his people's worth in interspecies cooperation. What he hadn't expected was the sound. Behind every sealed pod, a faint heartbeat. The overseer stopped before one chamber. The glass dimmed to transparent, revealing a woman kneeling on a narrow cot. Red hair hung in loose strands, her fox-like ears twitching faintly. A glowing collar circled her neck, pulsing with each breath. Her amber eyes lifted, meeting his without fear, only weary curiosity. The alien gestured with a spindly limb. Specimen 6V, marked unfit for reproduction. Genetic termination authorized. Garen's mouth went dry. You're saying she's defective? Unviable for continuation, the Kethri hissed. She will be decommissioned at your discretion, Human Holt. Observe procedure, record compliance. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Cold air spilled out. Garan stepped forward, datapad in one hand, pulse hammer in the other. The tool was designed for clean endings. Instant neural disruption, painless. She didn't flinch. Didn't plead. Just stared. Will it hurt? She asked, voice quiet, precise, the translator embedded in her collar giving her words an eerie echo. Garan froze. He'd expected a creature. Not a voice that trembled with comprehension. Not eyes that understood death. No, he said softly, lowering the hammer. Not if I do this right. He looked down at the datapad. One press would end her life and close the report. One falsified entry could erase her from the system just the same. He took a slow breath. Then, instead of pulling the trigger, he opened the pad's admin panel and changed her status line. Terminated, confirmed by Officer Holt. The collar blinked once, blue, then steady white. When he looked up again, she was still watching him, confusion flickering behind her composure. Why didn't you? He swallowed. Because you looked at me, he said quietly. And I saw someone worth saving. The door sealed shut behind them, cutting off the sterile light. Garan Holt had just committed quiet treason aboard a ship that didn't believe in mercy. And deep in the hum of containment, one forbidden heartbeat kept echoing. Garan hadn't realized how loud the ship was until he started sneaking. The Kethri Prime thrummed like a living organism, deep vibrations that crawled through the floor plating, pulsing with the steady rhythm of reactors and ventilation vanes. The Kethri themselves never seemed to notice it. They were tall, jointed creatures, their voices a layered static that the translation implants barely kept up with. Garan had only met a handful face to face, but each conversation left him feeling like an animal tolerated in a sterile lab. Now he was breaking their rules. He kept his pace measured, datapad tucked against his side, the containment chamber echoing behind him. The memory of her eyes lingered, that faint amber glow when she'd said, "Will it hurt?" It had been more human than anything else he'd seen aboard this place. He reached the decommission logs first, inputting his code to complete the falsified report. The system accepted it with a soft tone, Subject 6V, terminated. Tissue reclamation pending. A lie so clean it almost disgusted him. He waited for the security drone to pass before heading back, using the dim side corridors reserved for maintenance. When he finally reached his assigned quarters, a small rectangular module of brushed metal walls and dim biolights, he locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. For a long minute he said nothing. Then, "Computer," he murmured, "requesting reallocation permit for behavioral specimen, designation 6V. The ship's AI hummed cold and efficient. Request outside of protocol parameters. Authorization required." He pressed the override, entering his officer clearance code. "Authorization hold Gamma 7. A pause, then, transfer request accepted. Behavioral specimen 6V reassigned for human social observation. Duration indefinite." The AI's tone dropped. "Subject delivery will commence shortly." He didn't have time to prepare for what that meant. Minutes later, 2 Ketheri handlers appeared at his door. Between them, she stood in silence, the same red hair, the same cautious eyes. She wore a plain gray uniform now, the collar still pulsing faintly blue. Her hands were clasped behind her back, as if trained to remain bound. "Specimen delivered per request," one of the aliens clicked. "Ensure containment integrity. Do not engage beyond observation." Garan nodded, forcing a neutral expression. "Understood." When they left, the door sealed, and silence filled the room again. She didn't move at first. Her gaze flicked from the door to him, then to the narrow cot, the viewport showing the endless black beyond. He realized she was waiting for instructions, or punishment. "You can sit," he said quietly. She hesitated, then perched at the edge of the cot, tail curled tight behind her legs. The electronic collar emitted a faint hum. "What's your name?" he asked. Her ears flicked once. "Designation 6V. No. I mean your name." A pause. "We were not given names." He sighed, lowering himself onto the stool across from her. "But you had one before." She studied him for several seconds. Her voice softened when she finally spoke. "Senna. That was before they made me forget." Garan leaned forward slightly. "They didn't do a very good job then." Her eyes narrowed a little, as if testing whether that was an insult. Then she looked down at her hands. "I failed the reproduction cycle. My metrics were unstable. I was not viable for the program." He rubbed his jaw, disgust rising like bile. "You mean they killed you for not being fertile enough?" Her tone was flat, mechanical, words spoken so often they'd lost meaning. "My purpose was to propagate. When that purpose failed, so did I." Something inside him twisted. "And you still talk about it like it's your fault." Her ears drooped. "It is how we were made to think." The ship vibrated softly around them. Outside, the faint starlight washed across her features, reflecting off the smooth metal of the collar. She was smaller than he'd expected, built for grace rather than power, yet every movement carried precision. "You're not an animal," he said after a long silence. She tilted her head, one ear flicking curiously. "I am not human either." "No," he admitted. "But you deserve to be alive." Her gaze lingered on him, cautious, puzzled. "Then what happens now?" Garan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd saved her life, yes, but now he had a living being marked terminated in his quarters aboard a ship that would tear them both apart if discovered. "I'll figure that out," he muttered. "For now, eat something." He handed her a ration packet. She turned it over like a strange artifact before mimicking how he opened his. When she tasted it, her nose wrinkled faintly. "It's dry. Welcome to ship food." For the first time, her mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close enough. He watched her in the dim light, realizing how quiet the room felt. On any other day, he would have logged his report, eaten alone, and gone to sleep in the artificial night cycle. But now, with her sitting there, alive, fragile, curious, the silence carried a strange warmth. When she finally lay down, tail curling around her, Garan returned to his terminal. The screen's glow painted his face in pale blue. He scrolled through the classified archives of the hybrid program, reading until the words started to blur. Specimen Group V, genetic splice between vulpine base model and cognitive human neuron array. Emotional retention deemed excessive. Rejected for compliance inconsistency. Subjects 1 through 12 terminated. He stopped reading. Somewhere behind him, Senna murmured softly in her sleep, a sound like a half-formed word. Garan glanced back, watching her chest rise and fall under the sterile light. Maybe he just doomed himself. But as he stared at her, he realized he never felt more certain of anything. "Sleep easy," he whispered. "You're safe here. For now, at least." The first morning cycle aboard Kethri Prime always began with the same mechanical announcement, a monotone chime followed by a synthetic voice reminding the crew that all life aboard served a function. Garan had grown used to that phrase in his first week. It was carved above the mess hall doors in the Kethri's angular script, a motto they seemed to worship. But now, after bringing Senna out of the containment levels, it made his stomach turn. He sat at his desk pretending to review logs while the ship lights shifted from deep blue to sterile white. Behind him, Senna stirred awake on the cot. The faint rustle of the blanket was followed by the soft chime of her collar reconnecting to the ship's local network. She winced, pressing her fingers to the device. "They check signals at shift change," she murmured, eyes half closed. "They track you constantly?" Garan asked. "Always. If I go too far from the assigned zone, it tightens." He clenched his jaw. "They didn't mention that in the orientation packet." Her ears flicked toward him, uncertain if he was serious. "Humans are not usually sent to containment. They say it disturbs your empathy reflex." "Disturbs?" He almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "That's one way to put it." Senna sat upright, smoothing her hair with precise, practiced motions. The scars along her neck, faint and symmetrical, looked surgical. Every mark on her was deliberate, like someone had mapped her down to the millimeter. "May I ask," she said carefully, "why you took me?" He didn't answer immediately. The truth was that he didn't know what to call it: instinct, anger, pity, or something deeper that defied regulation. "Because what they were doing was wrong," he said finally. "And I was tired of pretending it wasn't." She seemed to turn that over, eyes narrowing slightly. "You are new here. You still believe in right and wrong." Her tone wasn't mocking, it was sad. Like someone who'd once believed the same and had it torn away. When she stood, her movement was graceful despite the exhaustion in her body. She padded toward the viewport, tail low, peering at the thin ring of a nearby planet. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if they keep us because they're afraid to admit we're too much like them?" Garan looked up from his datapad. "You think they see you as a threat?" "I think they see feelings as a threat," she said. "That's why they cut them out of themselves. And why they can't stand to see them in others." He watched her silhouette against the starlight. She was supposed to be broken, a defective experiment, yet she spoke with more clarity than most officers he'd met. He changed the subject before it could twist the knife further. "You'll need to stay here during my shift. No one comes to this level much, but if they do, hide. And don't answer if anyone calls through the comm." She nodded obediently, though her eyes flickered with unease. He hesitated. "You don't need to bow, or wait for orders. Just be comfortable, all right?" She tilted her head, ears twitching in confusion. "Comfort is not a directive." "Then make it one." It took her a second to realize he wasn't joking. The corners of her lips quirked upward, briefly, fleetingly, and for a moment, Garan saw what she might look like without fear. Later that cycle, he forced himself through routine duties on the command level. The alien officers barely acknowledged his presence, their translucent eyes flicking past him like he was furniture. He filed maintenance logs, reviewed drone pads, and nodded through reports. The Kethri captain, a towering figure with a mouth that never moved when it spoke, summoned him only once to remind him that the decommission list was ahead of schedule. "Efficiency is expected, Human Holt," the captain rasped. "We appreciate your cooperation." Garan met that dead gaze and said, "Always happy to serve." The words tasted like acid. When the shift ended, He descended 3 decks in silence, replaying every lie he told that day. He'd confirmed a dozen terminations, all falsified through back channels he shouldn't have access to. Every entry was another nail in his own coffin, but if the system was already rotten, he decided, then it deserved to burn from within. When he opened his cabin door, the sight stopped him short. Senna had taken apart the room. Not destructively, precisely. The terminal panels, the power conduits, the maintenance grills along the wall. She was kneeling on the floor with wires spread out before her, collar glowing brighter than before. He opened his mouth to shout before realizing she was humming softly, working with delicate tools she'd scavenged. The collar's hum changed pitch. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Her ears flattened guiltily. "I am trying to see how it speaks to the ship." He knelt beside her, staring at the circuitry. "You can read this? I was designed to understand command code," she said. "They didn't expect me to use it." He stared, equal parts impressed and horrified. "If they catch you..." She looked up sharply. "You will be punished." "That's not what I know." She offered the faintest ghost of a smile. "But I can help you hide me. The signal will still pulse, but I can make it echo as if it's still in the lower decks." Garan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You can spoof the collar?" "Temporarily." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it." She bent back to work, fingers moving with impossible precision. The room filled with soft beeps and murmured code, her tail flicking with concentration. Finally the collar blinked twice and steadied. "Done," she said, sitting back. "For now, they think I am still terminated." He leaned against the bulkhead, staring at her. "You just saved us both a lot of trouble." She met his gaze evenly. "You saved me first." For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence between them. Then Garan realized what had just happened. A being engineered for obedience had just defied her creators, and done it with calm precision. He smiled, just a little. "You're more human than half the people I've met." Senna blinked, uncertain whether that was a compliment. "Then perhaps humanity is not so defective after all." Her tone was dry, but something like amusement flickered behind it. He laughed quietly. "Careful, Senna. That's how revolutions start." She tilted her head. "What is a revolution?" "It's when people who were told to obey finally say no." She considered that, amber eyes glowing faintly. "Then perhaps one has already begun." Outside, the ship drifted past a dying star, its pale light spilling through the viewport like a promise. Inside, one human and one defective hybrid sat in silence, 2 conspirators bound by the simplest rebellion of all, compassion. Days turned into ship cycles, and Garan learned how to live between lies. Every report he submitted was a careful performance, numbers balanced, compliance perfect, language stripped of anything resembling empathy. The Ketheri trusted data more than faces, and he used that to his advantage. Senna, meanwhile, began to adapt to her strange new half-life. She moved quietly around his quarters, learning the rhythm of the ship by sound alone. At first she was cautious, waiting for orders that never came, but curiosity eventually overcame conditioning. He'd come back from a shift to find her rearranging the nutrient packs by taste preference, or humming softly to the ship's hum like it was a melody. Once she'd even asked, "Why do you eat when you are not hungry?" He'd smiled tiredly. "Because I'm human. We eat when we're bored, angry, or sad. Sometimes all at once." She tilted her head. "That seems inefficient." "Yeah," he'd said. "That's kind of our brand." But beneath their quiet routine, danger tightened. The more time passed, the greater the chance the deception would unravel. Garan kept his terminal locked, and Senna's falsified telemetry running, but he knew it wouldn't last forever. The Ketheri were meticulous. If they found a discrepancy, it wouldn't just be her life on the line, it would be his species' credibility in their eyes. That thought didn't scare him as much as it used to. Maybe humanity deserved a little fear. One shift cycle, while monitoring reactor output, Garen's console flashed a notice. Containment audit scheduled. Deck 12. His blood ran cold. Deck 12 was Senna's original unit. He immediately opened the encrypted logs. The system showed routine sweep orders, verification of terminated assets. Normally, falsified death reports stayed buried under procedural backlogs. But something had drawn the auditor's attention. He tapped his comm. Ship AI, confirms scheduled audit. The cold voice answered, confirmed. Audit initiated by Overseer Ketheri COR Group. Random quality assurance. Random. That meant fate had decided to roll the dice. When he returned to his quarters, Senna was sitting cross-legged on the floor, tail flicking lazily. She looked up at his expression and immediately went still. "They're rechecking the logs," he said. Her ears flattened. "They will know. Not if I fix it first." He sat at his desk and pulled up his data pad, fingers flying. "Your ID tag is still broadcasting as terminated through the main system, but if the audit compares raw biosignature logs, they'll notice the faint telemetry we've been looping." She rose quietly and came to stand beside him. "I can reduce the pulse further." He shook his head. "If you make it too faint, it'll read as interference. They'll dig deeper." Senna studied the code scrolling across the screen, her expression tightening. "You cannot win a game where they wrote all the rules." Garen's jaw flexed. "Then I'll rewrite them." That night, he did something reckless. While the rest of the crew slept, he slipped into the maintenance shafts, descending toward the lower archives where the Ketheri kept their genetic data. The air was colder here, sharp with sterilized tang. Rows of storage pods glowed like icy lanterns, each holding labeled samples and experiment records stretching back decades. He located the one marked 6V genomic base. With careful precision, he wiped it clean and uploaded a counterfeit, one of the terminated batches from an unrelated project. When the auditors checked, they'd find consistent termination data for the wrong specimen. But as he worked, a faint sound echoed through the hall, claws tapping metal. He turned and froze. Senna crouched at the corridor entrance, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "How did you?" "I followed your scent," she said simply. "You were gone too long." He nearly laughed despite the panic. "You realize if anyone sees you down here, that's it for both of us." "I did not wish to be alone," she said softly. Something in her tone stopped his reprimand. He sighed, shaking his head. "All right. Help me finish this, then we get back." Together they worked in silence, she scanning for movement, while he forged the final checksum. When the upload confirmed, he exhaled in relief. Senna stepped closer, eyes reflecting the console light. "You risked too much for one defective creation." He met her gaze evenly. "You're not defective." Her ears twitched. "That is not what your kind once said of hybrids. That was before I met one worth knowing." She blinked, clearly unused to compliments. For a brief moment, her hand hovered near his arm, then she withdrew it quickly, as though afraid of breaking invisible protocol. "Come on," he murmured. "We're not safe here." They made it back without being seen. Garen spent the next few days tense, waiting for the audit results. Each time the comm chimed, his heart stopped. But the review came and went without notice. The fake record held. When he finally let himself relax, he found Senna sitting at the viewport again, her tail slowly sweeping across the floor. "They believed it?" she asked. "For now," he said. "But we can't stay here forever." She nodded faintly. "Then what will you do?" He hesitated. "There are colonies outside the main patrol routes, planets the Ketheri ignore. If we reach one, maybe we can disappear." "You would leave your people?" He smiled sadly. "You think the Ketheri see me as one of them?" Her head tilted, studying him. "No. But you still choose to stay human. Someone has to." For the first time, she laughed, quiet, uncertain, but real. It was a strange, lilting sound that filled the sterile room with warmth. Garan looked at her, and found himself smiling too. "That's new. I have not laughed since before they took me," she admitted. He leaned back in his chair, watching the stars drift past the viewport. Then we'll make sure you get the chance again. Silence stretched between them, comfortable now. The hum of the ship faded into background rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Then Senna spoke again, voice soft. If freedom means choice, then I choose to stay. He turned toward her. Stay? With you. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Somewhere deep down, he knew what she meant, and what it would cost. Outside, the stars glimmered cold and distant, but for the first time, either of them felt entirely alone. Garen's next shift was supposed to be routine, monitoring the thermal relays near the main reactor core, but ever since Senna's words the previous night, I choose to stay, he couldn't focus. The phrase replayed in his head as he walked through the gleaming corridors of Cathari Prime. Her tone hadn't been mechanical or fearful, it had been deliberate. Free will spoken aloud by a being who was never meant to have it. The thought made him proud and terrified all at once. When he reached the engineering hub, a cluster of Cathari techs floated in harnessed chairs, their translucent limbs clicking against consoles. They barely acknowledged him, until one addressed him in that liquid, insectal voice. Human Holt. You were among the last to verify containment decommissions. Yes, he said evenly, pulse ticking in his throat. There were signal anomalies. Minor but flagged. You will submit a compliance analysis at next shift change. He forced a nod. Understood. The alien turned away, losing interest. Garen exhaled slowly and returned to his station, palms slick with sweat. Signal anomalies. That meant Senna's spoof had been noticed, barely, but enough to make them curious. He needed a solution fast, something that would bury her data deeper than the Cathari's probes could reach. When his shift ended, he took the maintenance lift down 2 levels instead of returning to his quarters. His friend in the Human Tech Division, Lieutenant Cale Dorn, was working there. Cale was one of the few other humans stationed on Cathari Prime, and though their friendship was cautious, Garen trusted him enough to ask the right questions. Cale raised an eyebrow when Garen appeared at his console. You look like you just saw the Commandant's meal list. Worse, Garen muttered. I need access to the collar schematics. The real ones, the ones they don't give us. Cale stared at him. You do realize those are off limits even for the Cathari science team, right? I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Cale studied him for a moment, then leaned back. You're doing something stupid, aren't you? Garen hesitated, then said quietly. Something human. The engineer's smirk faded. He opened a private channel, typing fast. You've got 10 minutes before the network audits refresh. After that, you didn't get this from me. Appreciated. As Garen uploaded the restricted files to his datapad, Cale's gaze flicked toward him. You're playing with fire, Holt. The last guy who tried rewriting their code, he didn't even get court-martialed. They just erased him. Then I'll make sure they never find me to erase. When Garen left the engineering deck, the pad in his pocket felt heavier than a gun. Back in his quarters, Senna was pacing, tail flicking rapidly. When she saw him, she froze. You were gone longer than usual. He managed a tired smile. Missed me already? Her ears twitched at the teasing tone. I was concerned. I had to borrow something, he said, holding up the pad. Blueprints for your collar. Her eyes widened, glowing faintly in the low light. You mean to remove it? That's the idea. He sat at the desk, scrolling through the dense code and engineering diagrams. The collar was a masterpiece of cruelty, a mix of neural sensors, explosive deterrent, and biometric encryption keyed to her DNA. Senna stood beside him, her breath shallow. If it misfires. It won't, he said, though he wasn't sure. But we'll need help. Someone who can override the Cathari's encryption net. Human engineers? He shook his head. None on this ship would risk it. Which means we'll need to find someone off-ship. Her gaze sharpened. You intend to leave? Yes, he admitted. We can't keep hiding. If I can get you to the fringe docks near the Uran Belt, there's a black market tech ring there. They specialize in alien biomod tech. If anyone can get that thing off your neck, it's them. Senna's tail lowered. You would abandon your post. Abandon? He repeated, almost laughing. They never gave me one worth keeping. Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for any trace of doubt. And if they catch you? He met her gaze squarely. Then they'll finally see what a human looks like when he stops obeying. She was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I will help you. You sure? You saved me, she said simply. Now I save you. They began preparing over the next few ship cycles. Garen rerouted maintenance reports to create false security rotations, while Senna mapped the patrol patterns from memory. Her perception was uncanny. She could hear the faint modulation in the Ketheri's hover drones and time their movements down to seconds. Between their planning sessions, quiet moments crept in, small, fragile things that Garen found himself holding onto. One evening, while he worked at his console, he heard a soft sound behind him. Turning, he saw Senna holding one of his datapads, scrolling through the archived Earth library he'd brought aboard. What is this? She asked. Books, he said, smiling faintly. Stories. She frowned slightly. They serve no function. They remind us what it means to have one. She looked down at the screen again. This one, she murmured. About the fox and the prince, it is strange. He chuckled. It's a story about love, kind of. She glanced up sharply. Love? It's what happens when someone matters more to you than yourself. Her eyes softened. Then perhaps it is not so strange. For a moment, the hum of the ship faded, leaving only the faint thrum of their shared heartbeat in the silence. The night before their escape, Garen packed only what he could carry: rations, forged clearance chips, a small pulse pistol. Senna watched him silently. You should sleep, he told her. I will not, she said. Dreams are not kind to me. He paused. Then we'll make new ones. She tilted her head. You speak as if you already believe we will live. He met her eyes. I have to. Her tail swayed faintly, brushing his arm as she turned away. Then I will believe too. Hours later, the Ketheri Prime drifted in quiet orbit above the barren moon. Garen's heart hammered as he keyed open the maintenance bay, an airlock rarely used, one that led directly to the shuttle staging area. Once we're out, he whispered. Don't look back. Senna nodded, her collar pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I am ready. They slipped into the corridor, shadows amid sterile light. The rebellion had begun. The shuttle base stretched before them like a cathedral of polished steel, high ceilings, cold light strips, and the slow drift of maintenance drones overhead. Garen led the way, his pulse a war drum in his ears. Each footstep echoed louder than it should have, and every echo felt like a countdown. They had rehearsed the path in whispers over the last 3 nights. Crossed the service gantry. Reached Dock C9. Launched the unregistered craft he'd bribed a technician to leave on standby. Simple on paper, impossible in practice. Senna's collar pulsed faintly with every heartbeat, a ghost of the chain she still carried. Her senses picked up more than his, each vibration, every hum of approaching power lines. 2 drones, 30 meters, she whispered, ears twitching toward the sound. He crouched behind a storage crate, drawing his pulse pistol. You sure? Yes. They paused near the control panel, then turned left. He waited. A pair of drones drifted into view, cold metal eyes sweeping the floor in synchronized arcs. When they turned, Garen moved fast, 2 shots, silent and precise. The machine sparked, dimmed, and dropped to the deck with soft metallic thuds. Senna's tail flicked once. Efficient. I had good incentive, he said. They crossed to the shuttle pad. The vessel waiting there was small, a courier shuttle built for cargo, not comfort. But it had a hyperlight drive and a human-compatible console, and that was all they needed. Garen keyed the access pad. The doors slid open with a hiss. Then the overhead comm crackled. Unauthorized energy discharge detected on Deck 11. All units report. Senna flinched. They found the drones. Move! Garan snapped. He pushed her inside, sealing the hatch. Strap in! The shuttle hummed as he powered up the systems. Warning lights flickered red, the NAV feed scrolling through a storm of alien script. He slammed his hand against the manual override, switching to human interface mode. The engines roared to life. Outside, the bay lights shifted from white to crimson. Sirens wailed, a sound like metallic shrieking. Garen's knuckles whitened around the throttle. Hang on! The clamps released with a violent jolt, and the shuttle lurched forward. Through the viewport, the vast hull of Kethri Prime loomed, its armor reflecting starlight like glass scales. Pursuit drones, Senna warned, eyes flashing gold. 4, no, 6. Garen threw the ship into a dive, the engines howling as they streaked past the outer ring. Blue plasma beams sliced the dark, one grazing their starboard side and leaving a molten scar across the hull. The cabin shuddered, alarms screaming. Can you jam their sensors? He shouted. Senna darted to the co-pilot's console. Her fingers moved like lightning, ears twitching with focus. I can mirror our signal, make them chase a false trail. Do it! She keyed a rapid sequence, and the readouts flickered. Moments later, the drone icons split into 2 clusters, one veering off toward empty space. Garan grinned through clenched teeth. Nice work! But the grin vanished when the calm burst alive again. Human Holt! Came the cold, inhuman voice of the Kethri captain. Return the specimen and surrender your vessel. Your actions will not alter the outcome. Senna froze. Her collar began to glow brighter, trembling around her throat. They are sending a signal. They can trigger it remotely. Garan swore, slamming the console. Where's the receiver? In the command core, linked to my neurocode. I can feel it. Pain flashed across her face, ears flattening. Garan grabbed the tools from the emergency kit, his voice steady despite the panic clawing at him. You hold this ship steady. I'll cut the signal manually. I cannot. Yes, you can. Trust me. Her hands shook, but she pressed them against the pilot controls. Do it quickly. Garan reached for the collar, his fingers brushing the faintly glowing seams. The circuitry thrummed like a heartbeat beneath his touch. He'd studied the schematics for days, but now, with her life on the line, every second felt eternal. Sensors locked. She gasped, body trembling. They're sending the kill code. Not today! He twisted the release mechanism, bypassing the central processor with a pulse of his multitool. The collar sparked violently. Senna screamed, then the light went out. The smell of scorched circuitry filled the cabin. For a heartbeat, Garan thought he'd failed. Then she exhaled, shaking, the metal ring clattering to the floor. Her eyes fluttered open, clear, terrified, alive. It's gone, she whispered. Yeah, he breathed, throat tight. You're free. Before either could say another word, the Kethri ship's shadow fell across them. Its massive silhouette blotted out the stars. Garen's console flared with proximity warnings. They'll fire, Senna said. Then we make them miss. He shoved the throttle forward, diving into the debris field surrounding the moon, burning engines, stray shards of wreckage spinning around them. Plasma fire chased their tail, but the shuttle slipped through the chaos like a thread through a needle. When they finally broke through the last field of wreckage, the stars widened before them, open, infinite. Garan looked at Senna. Her fur was singed in places, her breathing shallow, but her eyes burned bright. You did it, he said softly. No, she whispered, gazing at him. We did. Behind them, the Kethri Prime receded into darkness, its sensors blind, its pride wounded. Ahead, the void opened wide, full of places where no one knew their names. For the first time since he'd boarded that cursed ship, Garan felt something close to peace. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold, silent, and free. For the first time, no orders echoed in Garen's ear, no Kethri commands slicing through his thoughts. Just the hum of the shuttle's engines and the faint, ragged sound of their breathing. Senna sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, the faint burn of the collar still visible around her neck. The broken ring lay on the deck between them, a symbol of everything he just defied. Garan reached down, picked it up, and turned it over in his palm. The inner edge was lined with thousands of microscopic needles, each one laced with control filaments that could kill her in a heartbeat. He hurled it into the waste chute. The sound it made when it hit was too small for the weight it carried. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. Senna's ears twitched. "Lighter," she murmured. "But strange. The silence is loud." He frowned. "Silence? For years I heard it, its pulse, its commands, its waiting. Now it's gone. My head feels too empty." Garan leaned forward. "You're not broken, Senna. That's what freedom feels like. It's messy. Loud in its own way." Her eyes met his, amber and steady. "Then it is good noise." He smiled, exhaustion softening his features. "Yeah. The best kind." A soft tone chimed on the console, snapping the moment. Garen's gaze shot to the screen. A proximity alert flared red across the NAV display, multiple contacts closing fast. "Damn it," he muttered, typing furiously. "They're tracking our heat trail. I masked our signal, but the Kethri use gravitic sweeps. They'll have us pinned in minutes." Senna straightened, her tail flicking once in determination. "How far to the debris field near the mining belt?" He blinked. "You know about that? I listened to them when they discussed containment disposal. It is dense enough to hide us." He nodded, adjusting course. "Then hold on." The shuttle banked sharply, the stars blurring into lines. The mining belt loomed ahead. Massive asteroids spinning in slow orbits, linked by shattered cables from old automated rigs. The region was notorious for radiation pockets and unstable gravity wells. Perfect for hiding. Or dying. As they approached, the ship shook violently. Garan gritted his teeth and rerouted power to the inertial dampeners. A tremor rippled through the hull. Senna gripped the armrest, her ears flat. "Are we going to make it?" she asked. "Define make it," he said, fighting the controls. A flash of plasma tore past them, searing the edge of their right wing. The ship lurched. Warning alarms wailed. Senna turned toward him, voice steady despite the chaos. "If they destroy us, what will become of your people?" "What?" he barked. "You risked everything for one hybrid. Do they know? Will they care?" Garan laughed harshly, sweat beading his forehead. "Probably not. But maybe one day they'll remember someone who did." The shuttle skimmed the outer layer of the asteroid field. Chunks of rock the size of city blocks spun around them. Garan threaded through the gaps with practiced precision, every muscle taut. The Kethri ships followed, their bright plasma engines carving ghost trails in the dark. "Hold steady," he said through clenched teeth. "Almost there." The sensors screamed a warning, massive energy surge ahead. "Gravitic rupture," Senna said sharply. "If we go through, we'll either die fast or vanish completely," he finished. She smiled faintly. "Then that is choice." He looked at her. "You've been around me too long." She met his eyes. "Not long enough." Garan grinned despite himself and pulled the lever. The shuttle plunged straight into the gravitational storm. The world bent. Space twisted. The stars became streaks of liquid light. For a moment, everything went silent. No alarms, no sound, just a strange weightlessness that crushed and freed them all at once. When reality snapped back, the stars looked different. The NAV display flickered and reset, showing unknown coordinates far beyond Kethri patrol range. They'd made it through. Senna exhaled, slumping against the seat, trembling. "Where are we?" "Nowhere they'll find us," Garan said. He killed the engines, letting the shuttle drift in the black. "We're ghosts now." Her tail brushed against his boot as she shifted to face him. "Then what do ghosts do when they are free?" He hesitated, then leaned back, staring at the unfamiliar stars. "They start over." Senna followed his gaze, her expression softening. "Then we begin." Outside the viewport, The endless void stretched on, a quiet, infinite horizon where no chains reached. Inside, Garen felt the first stirrings of something dangerously close to hope. The ship drifted in silence, its engines cooling, the hull creaking softly under the pressure shifts of deep space. Beyond the viewport lay a starfield neither of them recognized, brilliant and untouched, a sky uncharted even by the Ketheri. For the first time since his transfer to Ketheri Prime, Garen let himself breathe. The ache in his chest eased, the tension in his shoulders fading like static. The warship, the labs, the sterile lights, they all felt like a dream dissolving behind him. He turned his head slightly. Senna sat on the deck beside the console, her tail curled around her knees. The faint glow of the instrument panel washed her in soft gold, illuminating the pale marks around her throat. Her ears twitched faintly, a tell he was beginning to recognize as nervousness. She'd been quiet since the jump, not out of fear, but thoughtfulness. He'd seen that look before, back on the ship, when she'd stared through the containment glass as if memorizing the world she might never see again. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why did you save me?" Her voice was steady, but something fragile hid beneath it. Garen leaned back in his chair, staring out at the void. "You really want to know?" "I need to," she said softly. "I was made to serve, to breed, to obey. That is all I have ever been. Yet you—" She hesitated, her fingers curling against her knees. "You risked everything for one defective hybrid. You should have killed me when they ordered it. Why didn't you?" He let the question hang in the air for a moment, thinking carefully. "Because I've followed orders my whole life," he said at last. "On Earth, in the colonies, under the Ketheri. And every time, it cost someone else their soul. When I looked at you, I saw another order waiting to be carried out. But for once, I wanted to say no." She tilted her head, ears twitching slightly. "Humans are strange." He smiled faintly. "We try our best. You broke law. You betrayed your species' allies. You threw away your future. Maybe," he said quietly. "But I didn't throw away myself." Senna studied him for a long time. Then she rose and crossed the cabin, moving with the silent grace of something born half wild. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint reflection of the stars in her eyes. "If I was made to serve," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "then let me serve you. Let me have purpose again." The words hit him like a blow. He saw sincerity there, but also the shadow of programming, a reflex she hadn't yet unlearned. "Senna," he said softly, shaking his head. "That's not what I want." Her ears folded back slightly. "Then what do you want?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "For you to choose something for yourself. Not for me. Not for them. For you." Her expression flickered, confusion, disbelief, a flicker of anger. "You would deny me purpose?" "I'd deny anyone the right to write it for you," he said gently. "You don't owe me anything." She took a small step closer, frustration leaking through the composure she usually kept like armor. "You freed me from them. I would not be alive if not for you. That means something." "It does," he admitted. "It means you get to live. That's enough." Her tail lashed once, betraying emotion she didn't yet know how to show. "You do not understand. I was never taught how to be without orders." Garen's voice softened. "Then start small. Eat when you want. Sleep when you want. Pick a name for the ship if you like. That's how freedom begins." She stared at him as if he were speaking another language. "You make it sound simple. It's not. It's terrifying. But it's worth it." Her gaze lowered to her hands. "I do not even know what I want." "Then that's your first choice," he said, smiling faintly. "Figure it out." The words lingered between them, fragile as starlight. After a moment, she spoke again, quieter now. "You are different from the others. The Ketheri said humans were easily controlled by fear. They weren't wrong," Garen said. "But sometimes fear pushes us to do the right thing anyway." Senna's ears flicked forward. "And what will you do now, human Holt?" He glanced at the stars. I don't know. Maybe find somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can breathe. We? She asked softly. If you want, he said. Silence stretched, warm and heavy. Then, for the first time, Senna smiled without hesitation. It wasn't the faint, uncertain curve he'd seen before. It was genuine, full, alive. I think, she said quietly, I want to learn how to live. He leaned back, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Then that's a good start. The stars beyond the viewport burned brighter, and in their light, Garan saw the faintest reflection of hope, something he thought the galaxy had long since killed. For a long while either spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence between them, no longer oppressive but alive with possibility. And somewhere deep inside, Senna's mind, once bound by programming and protocol, began to awaken to something entirely her own. 3 months later, the shuttle was almost unrecognizable. It had once been a scarred cargo hauler, patched together with stolen parts and desperation. Now, its interior was alive, wires neatly rerouted, lighting soft and golden instead of the Ketheri's sterile white. Small plants grew in nutrient tubes along the walls, their green leaves catching the cabin light. A miracle, given what they'd started with. Senna called it haven. Garan hadn't argued. He sat at the navigation console, watching the quiet rotation of a pale blue planet below. The world was unmarked on any Ketheri chart, orbiting a dim red sun. Its atmosphere was thin but breathable, its surface covered in wide salt flats and narrow valleys that shimmered with mineral light. Not paradise, but empty, quiet, and far enough from patrol routes to be theirs. Senna's reflection appeared in the viewport glass behind him, a faint blur of color and movement. She had changed too. The rigid, wary stillness that once defined her was gone. She walked barefoot through the ship now, hair loose, tail swaying lightly as she moved. She'd scavenged parts of her old uniform into a kind of tunic, functional but personal, a symbol that she wasn't anyone's property anymore. Autopilot stable? She asked, leaning over his shoulder. Stable enough, Garan said. We'll make a surface descent once the scans finish. Temperatures mild, radiation minimal. Senna nodded, then glanced out the viewport. It looks lonely. Lonely's not always bad, he said. She tilted her head, studying his expression. Humans always say that when they are afraid to rest. He chuckled quietly. You're learning too fast. I had a good teacher. The ship hummed around them, steady and alive. Garan looked at the screen one last time, then powered down the thrusters. The engine quieted to a low murmur. Silence fell, real, unfiltered silence. They stood side by side, watching the planet's light drift across the console. Remember what you said, she murmured. That freedom begins with choice. I remember. She smiled faintly. Then I choose to stay. He turned toward her. Still sure? She nodded. For now. That for now made him smile. She was learning what it meant to keep choices open, to live without chains, visible or otherwise. They spent the following weeks building something that resembled peace. Garan converted part of the cargo bay into a workbench, wiring solar panels and atmospheric scrubbers salvaged from wrecked drones. Senna explored the planet's surface, returning with small bundles of metallic dust and strange crystalline plants that shimmered faintly in low light. She'd taken to cataloging them, filling a data slate with sketches and notes in 2 languages, the Ketheri script she'd been born into, and the human alphabet she'd painstakingly learned. One evening, Garan found her sitting cross-legged by the open airlock, staring out at the thin horizon. The sun was low, painting the salt plains in violet and rose. Her tail flicked slowly in rhythm with the faint breeze. Still can't get over seeing a sky that isn't a ceiling? He asked, lowering himself beside her. She smiled faintly. It feels too large. Like it could swallow me. Yeah, he murmured. Took me a while to stop feeling that way too. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. The sound of the ship's venting systems was distant, almost comforting. Do you think they'll come for us? she asked finally. Garan shrugged. Maybe. But we've made it this far. She nodded, then looked down at her hands. If they do, I won't hide again. He looked at her sharply. You won't have to. She met his gaze. Not because you'll protect me. Because I can protect myself. That earned a smile from him. Now you sound like a soldier. Then perhaps I am learning from you, she said softly. Over time, their quiet refuge began to attract faint signals, weak, encrypted transmissions from distant systems. Garan had built a shortwave receiver to monitor surrounding space. Most of it was background noise, but one day, a coded human distress beacon broke through. It wasn't a voice, just data, coordinates, warnings, fragments of language. When he decoded it, Senna was beside him. It's a colony outpost, he said slowly. Under blockade. The Kethri are tightening control across the fringe. Her ears lowered slightly. More cages. Yeah, he said. And more people to break them. Senna looked at the signal again, then turned to him. You intend to help them? Garan didn't answer right away. The human in him, the soldier, knew what it meant to go back into that world. But the man who had freed a single hybrid knew he couldn't ignore it. If they're like us, he said finally, they deserve the same chance. Senna nodded slowly. Then we go together. You sure? I'm free now, she said, her voice calm and certain. That means I choose where to stand. Garan smiled. Then let's make this count. A few hours later, the Haven lifted off from the salt flats, its engines glowing faintly against the darkening sky. Through the cockpit window, the planet shrank into a soft glimmer of blue and white. Senna's hand brushed the back of his chair as she leaned forward, eyes fixed on the stars. Do you think they'll ever understand? She asked quietly. What it means to be human? He looked at her, the faint light catching her fur, her eyes. Maybe. If we keep showing them. The ship accelerated, streaking toward the endless dark. Two fugitives, one cause, and the smallest ember of hope lighting the void. In the silence that followed, Garan reached for the throttle, and Senna whispered something he almost didn't catch. They built me to serve, she said. But I think I was meant to live. He smiled. And now you are. Outside, the stars seemed to burn a little brighter. And somewhere, far behind them, the universe shifted, just enough for one small act of defiance to echo across it. Thanks for listening. If Garan and Senna's story moved you, if you believe compassion is humanity's greatest rebellion, then hit subscribe, drop a like, and join us for more HFY tales of courage, defiance, and hope among the stars.